It's Tuesday night, and that can only mean one thing, is that you are locked in wherever you are on your cell phones, on your computers, on your laptops, or gaming consoles, doesn't matter. You are sitting down, locked in with Dynasty Points, the number one provider for Dynasty video content here at fantasypoints.com. The welcome wagon has been rolled out for us here over the last 3 weeks, bringing you top-down, top-tier content for you Dynasty Degens. Like myself, I, of course, am your host of the Most Times on Hands. I am Thomas Tipple. Joining me, as always, is Jakob Sanderson, and back in the midst of traveling all the way from a hotel, we have Lucas Gilbert back with us today to talk running back rankings, probably the position that we get asked the most questions about. Let's be honest, it is the most volatile position in fantasy football. It can change in a blink of an eye. A dynasty running back's value could plummet with a stub toe and a tweak of a knee. We saw it. Travis Etienne was RB1 for 3 weeks, and then he was RB8 because he had 3 bad games last year. Like, it changes so drastically. So today, gentlemen, what we are here to do is talk about the benefits of tier-based ranking. We're going to talk about who we have where, and then take some questions from the people to get us going. First off, Jakob, when are you updating your rankings at Thinking About Thinking?
So it's basically probably tomorrow, first thing in the morning, depending on how late I finish them tonight. We're doing like dynasty rankings typically get updated every 2 weeks, although I kind of did a periodic update last week. So I'm not sure I'll have the full dynasty ranks updated, but the running back ranks, which is something that I don't do. I mean, you'll see my running back rankings get updated every time I do a dynasty rankings because they get updated. But for people who have been following me over a while, I have the annotated running back tiers, which is a little bit different. So in addition to a straight ranking, what I also do is I give everyone an asset classification on 4 different categories. So everybody gets a production classification, a contingent value classification, their asset class for younger players, and then an age modifier. And so this results in sort of this color-coded 4-category tiering system that you see on the sheet. Plus, I add some notes. You just get my written thoughts about the player. So it's a little bit more of a detailed project. I cluster them out in addition to just tiering them by productive value players, buying power players. It's a much more expansive process, which is why I do it only 3 or 4 times per off season. And then I'm doing my mid-season update. So that'll all go live. They're all ranked. They're all clustered. They're ready to rock. The only thing that they aren't right now is all the notes aren't written up. So if you're listening here, we'll talk them through. If you are thinking about thinking a subscriber, you will get it in your inbox probably within 24 hours.
Exclusive update here on Dynasty Points for Jacob's picking Jacob's RB brain. Lucas, you are probably the more grounded type player of the group. I think Jakob and I are kind of extremists in our trains of thought. But you are kind of the more level-headed player from the way I view things anyway. How do you approach the Dynasty RB landscape in general?
So I do like to try to be the voice of the people here, the voice of the inexperienced Dynasty manager who says stupid things from time to time, but it's stupid things that lead to growth. And that's what we all need to do is grow here. I'm looking at the Dynasty landscape more so from trying to find those players who in a position that loses value very quickly, which players are going to maintain or get a little bit more value as you hold on to them. What I've been trying to do, especially this season, is look at it more from those who can actually help me now and then moving them whenever I need to after I've gotten the value I need to help my team. So it's not just going after the super young guys who are 23 or younger and everyone else is dead to me, but going after some of the older players like whenever Zach Moss was relevant for a really long time, trying to have Zach Moss. Even though it's ugly, Brian Robinson's he's a top 12 RB right now, but looking for players that aren't necessarily the studs, but the ones who are going to help you win your leagues, or players who you can hold on to and get value for to the more competing teams right now.
Right. So you're more looking at the RB churning out process more than the just targeting the elites, not even the provens, but the elites. I feel like that's a clear distinction. So let's
running back shouldn't be a still. It should not be a still sort of position on your dynasty rosters. It needs to be extremely dynamic, because the value is the most volatile out of any other position in fantasy football. So definitely have to be paying attention to it. Definitely need to be churning through them, unless you have Bijan Robinson. But even that's been a little painful this season.
Often not fun this year.
No, and I mean reports earlier that he's coming back, but we'll see. That's classic owner. We lost Lucas. What just happened?
I don't always buy that stuff. Like, we get a lot of the mid-season reports on a coach being safe for the following year are like historically the worst reports ever, because you never get a report that a coach who's actively doing well is safe the following year, right? Like, it's not like the Lions are going to come out and be like, hey guys, just so you know, I talked to ownership and Dan Campbell's safe next year. It's like, yeah, we know that Dan Campbell's safe next year. It's always like some team with some reporter that's like, this coach that's just clearly going to get fired, like, contrarian view, maybe he won't be. And then usually what happens is like that team then just keeps losing and then they do get fired. Like, I remember like Matt Rule last year went from he is like safe for life to he's safe next year to he's safe through the end of the season to he got fired this morning in like the period of a month. Like, these things change pretty darn quick.
We talk about not listening to coach speak, and I think that's definitely a big part of it. But as we were talking, like, I think
this is literally coach speak. It's just like speak about coaches.
Right. Yeah, perfect. So zero RB has been kind of the talk of the town the last couple of years, like, especially with obviously it, I guess that was more of a hero RB approach winning Best Ball Mania, but zero RB and being anti RB is kind of the in. It's the in, it's now. And I think Hunter, we'll start it off with a question. This question came in at 6:30. He was ready. So Hunter Stantine, we appreciate the question. I want to kick it off with this because I feel like this question kind of sets the table for the rest of the running back discussion. So let's just get right to that as soon as my mouse will go to my middle monitor. At what point does the overall environment become so hostile to running backs that they are worth the injury risk / short shelf life, and you start buying? Are there still tiers you fade even at a discount? And he continues with Dalvin Cook, Zeke Elliott, now maybe Najee, high draft capital bell cows that saw efficiency decrease and then fell off a cliff. Anyone else fit that mold that we should be trying to sell? So this is a two-part question. We'll get through the first part. At what point does the running back environment get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm just buying player A, player B, because the price has just fallen entirely too far? I'll lead. My favorite example of this was DeAndre Swift this offseason. He went from insanely too high value to where he's going in the second round. Then he fell to the fourth and the fifth the year after. And then he just dropped entirely too far, and we bought in to a benefit. So Swift is the perfect example of this to me, but I will start with Jacob here. How would you approach the question?
It's a little hard. A little hard for me to kind of scrutinize what this question means. It's so hostile to running backs that they're worth the injury risk, and you start buying. I guess I don't really understand if it's hostile that I would then start buying. I guess the idea is that there's a scarcity effect. I think maybe that's what he's getting at.
Yeah, I think definitely. That's what I took.
Yeah.
Out of my example.
Okay. So I think that it's definitely I mean, Yeah, and basically anytime that you're able to get like the discount priced in on a running back, right? That's probably when you want to be doing that. So if you can buy existing injured running backs, or running backs where the usage isn't going their way, right? Like Gibbs would be a great example of this season, where it was like he was pretty universally valued as a top 5 guy coming into the season, and then like all of the risk that we already knew was there, and frankly, like if you just ask someone in the summer, like, what's the most likely scenario for Gibbs, it probably would have been like, oh, well, he probably has kind of a slow start and then he finishes really strong. And like, that's exactly what's happened, but yet we still like reacted really hard to the slow start. And so, not to say that what's transpired over the last while, I think was the most likely scenario. It was not an inevitable scenario. So it's certainly much better to be buying a player like Gibbs when people are pricing in the worst and they're not pricing in the best case scenario, for sure. So it's nice. I think it's totally fair. I know some players have views on the running back position where it's just like, I'm never allocating more than X value to a running back, right? So that just means I'm missing out on the Bijan. If it means I'm missing out on the Brief, whatever. I'm going to only buy my running backs for like a first or less. And then we'll just turn the position. And I think that works pretty well if you're in like a highly liquid league, right? I think that's part of it too. There's certainly plenty of leagues where, there's a premium on draft capital. People are always active. They want to make moves. And so, yeah, you can get like a Najee Harris type who is like going to be in the league for a while and going to be startable for a while for like a 25 second. Or David Montgomery, perfect example of a guy who's just always freely available, very cheap. James Conner's always been freely available in these types of leagues. And yeah, if you can just like churn out running back points kind of on a year-to-year, week-to-week basis, that's probably my preference if it's a super active league. But it depends on the league. Like you get certain, like, I'll use our Tom and I's home league as an example. It's kind of a tough league in that about half the league is very active and the other half isn't. It's also been a league that's been around for several years now. So it's pretty stratified. You get kind of every year, there's like a couple of high value teams that are competing. And there's a couple of pretty high value teams that are not competing because, again, you can't really make that many trades. So it's hard to it's hard to just sustain. And then you get a bunch of teams in the middle, some of which have reasonable value. And some teams just have no value and no players to trade for. And other people never check their direct messages. So if you want, realistically, your chances of I want to just trade a late 2 and get a starter, not super high in a league like that, right? And similarly, your odds of, I have this player who's producing that's on my bench, I don't need them, I like to cash them out for a pick, also not particularly high. So realistically, I think I'm more drawn to, I can't assume anything is liquid here. So I kind of want to stack premium youth assets at all my positions if I have the value to do so, because I can't just assume that I'll be able to grab a guy for a 2 and then when I need him, and then sell a guy for a 2 when I don't need him.
Right. Jonathan, not OP, but I think it's a cue about market sentiment, hostile overall environment equal to market fading RB, because everyone's gun shy about inherent fragility for running backs, i.e. do you zig when others zag? Yeah, and that's kind of what Jacob just broke down. I think it's man, it can be tough. So there are situations that I just don't want to trade into because their prices don't actually reflect what's happening. So let's look at Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley was a buy heading into the year, right? Lucas, we were all like, yeah, Saquon Barkley bounced back. The offense is looking better. He's, a year healthier, 26 years old. He's still got some of that elite production. And the team has fallen apart. He's 26, 27. He's going to have a questionable contract situation. He's not a dynasty running back that I want to be buying into. I would rather go on either end of the spectrum. I would rather do what I did where I spent 2 late ones and went and got a Travis Etienne, or I would rather tier off of Barkley all the way down to somebody like Rachaad White and net a pick back while I can. Is how I approach these things. But it can be difficult to do so. I think your micro market determines a lot of that. I think that's a very important stance to have. You've been selling a lot of running backs though, Lucas. So is it?
I've been trying to sell more than I've actually sold, which is making me really sad. I have Devin Singletary, who is single-handedly keeping me from being the 12 seed in one of our leagues, and I'm so sad about it.
Then just drop him. Like, what are we doing?
He's too
I don't know.
polite to do that.
I can't just drop him. I'm like, I don't know. Regardless, maybe
What are you asking for? You're the problem here. You have
I'm
Devin
asking
Singletary
for a fourth, and no one will give me a fourth.
Look, this is very simple. If there's a player on your team that no one will give you a fourth for, that's what the drop button is for.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I will say it seems it's like hurts me in
I feel like Don Draper. That's what the money is for.
It hurts my soul to drop someone who just scored 25 fantasy points.
It does.
This week. Like I can't bring myself to it. But yeah, it's me. Hi.
Someone should
I'm the
trade
problem. It's me.
No, someone should trade you. This is the two wrongs don't make a right thing, right? I always get into these discussions with people. Someone's like, "What am I like dumb for turning down like a second for Keenan Allen on this 1-9 team?" And I'm like, "Look, like they're like people should be offering more." It's like I think both of you are dumb. I think people should offer you more than a second for Keenan Allen. But if they aren't, and you're 1-9, I think you should take the second for Keenan Allen. Like but two wrongs don't make a right. The problem is, like, look, if I was in your league right now, I teleport into your league, I guarantee you I'd offer you a fourth for Devin Singletary. You can take that to the bank.
Please do. Please do. I'm easy right now, okay? Super easy.
But much like Larry Bird, I'm not walking through that door. So, at the end of the day, spite, it's like, oh, well, I have Drake May instead of Caleb Williams, but what else did you get in the trade? Well, I got spite. I spited my league mates. So you're trading Caleb for Drake May plus spite.
Like fair enough. To go back to the question and it's all good.
You're here to steer the show. I'm here to derail the show.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I actually at the end of our most recent episode, Drew and I were like, why does our show always go off the rails? And it was like, because neither of us are hosts. Like, we don't have like a Tom or like someone to be like next subject. Like, it's like two people who aren't co-hosting. But what that means is we just keep talking. And it just never ends.
Hey, that's Sweating Bullets, by the way. Also phenomenal content.
So your actual question, though, like getting back to that, I think that the expectations that we as fantasy managers put on these running backs is what makes it so hostile. And outside of just the way your league's operating in, you need to be okay with having an expectation that's different than what the general fantasy community has and finding those advantages inside of that, especially on some of the fragile or the old, the gross assets. Like the James Connors are helping people win leagues, or at least he was last year. I know he's been hurt. That's a whole other thing.
Oh, he'll help down the stretch. I guarantee you he'll help down the stretch.
Yeah, Devin Singletary is going to help somebody win a league this year, and I can't even sell him for a fourth. Zach Moss is probably why some of the teams in your leagues are in first right now, and you're looking at them and going, this is gross. This makes no sense. There's so much value out there because people can't match the production with the expectations they had going in. And it's also why people are way overpriced at certain times. Gotta find whenever that's happening, take advantage of it. And something that I at least struggle with as a fantasy manager is matching expectations with a lack of production or lack of obvious ways to get to that elite production. I'm definitely a Dameon Pierce sympathizer. I won't say truther, but sympathizer. I want him.
That's a great way to put it. I agree with you. I'm also a Dameon Pierce sympathizer.
But
I sympathize with everyone that drafted him, living with the shame.
Like I've never even been high on Pierce in terms of having a lot of them, but I've always just like appreciated watching him. And so most of my like podcasting life has been me on a podcast with a Pierce hater, and I'm like, I agree with you, but like, man, he's pretty good.
I have expectations.
He's probably going to be
him.
a big buy this offseason for me now that he's actually cheap.
He was a buy for me last offseason whenever he was cheaper than he was as a rookie, because I said, all right, my expectation for him just watching him is that when given the opportunity, he will be a good running back. And he's worth a second plus a little sprinkle on top of some bench spot that I don't care about, and we'll move on with life. But he has not done that. It makes me really sad, and I hate that I invested so much in him. But that was a time where my expectations overseeded like what his actual production was or what his real path to production was. And that's just what you have to balance here in this really gross running back environment, is finding where those discrepancies are.
I had an idea of what the show is going to be, but we're just going to fucking derail it right now. No, I think running back is one of the positions where you have to factor in why these things are happening. Dameon Pierce is less successful because they overhauled the system that he's in. So if he's on this same team next year with this same offensive coordinator and they're running the zone scheme, the Shanahan scheme, guess what? Pierce is not going to be that guy that is as successful. And now you're just holding an RB3 down with weight. No, I'm not buying Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce's time was fun. It was a good ride for like 6 weeks last year, but it's Jover. I'm not. I can't do it. Where do I have him ranked? I think I have him all the way down. Oh my God, he's RB 29 for me, and I think he's gonna stay there.
Where do I have him?
Until he goes lower.
Of course, my ranks are almost impossible to actually count, which is the point. I just, I try to obscure anything resembling
an actual ranking system
from the rankings. So
he's way down there.
So you want to hear something gross, Thomas? Tom Tipple.
Please.
He is my RB 33, and I know I'm dropping him lower whenever I do my ranks.
Oh, that's way too low.
Boom goes to dynamite.
I'm going in the opposite direction. I know that I'm slightly overcorrecting here.
No,
it's just I'm losing so much faith in him because
never mind. That's not too low. I have him ranked like around there.
How am I the highest?
The way it looks on my sheet is that he's like 38. He's not actually, because of the way I have the things clustered out. I think he'd be like 34 or something.
Okay, well let's talk about these tiers, Jacob, because we got off the rails there a little bit. We're gonna reel it back in. Let's talk about tiers. How do you determine who goes in what tier, and what determines your cutoff? What are you using to cut this off? Because there are people out there that may not totally understand what we're talking about when we're talking about tier-based ranking. I know traditionally it's 1 through 55 or whatever is the case, right. But we get asked a lot of trade questions. Would you trade running back A for this running back and a second round pick? And a lot of the time it comes down to where you have them tiered, where you have them ranked. Are you comfortable jumping with someone that you value equally the same to add a pick? I think if people get a grasp on that, I think it will solve most trade questions in the Dynasty community. This is how I look at getting deals done most of the time. And speaking of trades, next week, it's going to be an all trade episode. It is going to be trade theory, how to handle your trade deadline, trade questions, where that's all we're doing next week. And I'm going to have more on that a little bit later. But let's talk about how you determine these tiers. Because, for example, I'm gonna give this away. Have Bijan Robinson tier of his own, number 1.
That's true.
In the next tier, you have Gibbs and Hall, same as me. After that, you have Taylor, McCaffrey, Etienne. Now, what this means is you'd be happy either way, going from Taylor to McCaffrey, McCaffrey to Etienne, Etienne to Taylor to some degree if there was a plus added on. Then you have your Achane, and then Eckler, Walker, and then Barkley, Jacob, Swift, Javonte, and then the tiers just start to separate themselves, and it may just seem random, but let's talk about how you get to those spots.
So the way I always do my tiers is I do it in terms of pick valuations. So like one of the things I always try to say is like, people always say like, what do you buy for? Like a lot of times I see rankings and they'll either just have the ranks and they'll say like, oh, well, you buy the players that I have higher than consensus, or you sell the players that I have below consensus, whatever. It's hard to do that, especially for this, because I don't update it very frequently. And so what I try to do is in terms of having the tiers is like, I try to capture, okay, what do I think this player is worth? What's their equilibrium price, right? So for instance, I have Breece Hall and Jahmyr Gibbs between 2 to 2.5 base firsts. And I guess people, I don't know if I've ever talked about the base pick valuation system on the Fantasy Points airwaves. So for people that are new to us, I express my tiers and I express almost all trade valuations in terms of what I call base picks. And a base pick doesn't actually exist in reality. It's basically a first in the following year that has an equal opportunity of landing in any of the 12 slots. So it's actually a little bit better than a mid first, because just the difference between like picks 1 and 6 is just more substantial than between 7 and 12. But whatever, if you want to think of it in your mind as a mid first, close enough. It's just a valuation tool. You won't find an actual pick like that, of course, in your actual league. So basically, I sort out the tiers by that system. And then within the tiers, it's either players that are kind of similar in terms of an asset class. So when I talk about an asset class, it's generally like, what are you using this player for, right? There's basically, 2 sources of value on a player. What do they do for you now, and what might they do for you later in terms of both production and potential to accrue value? So Jahmyr Gibbs and Devon Achane, for instance, same asset class, right? They're both rookies. They're both running backs. They're both players that are going to have a certain level of production now. They're both players that you can reasonably expect to produce more later, all that stuff. So you'll see like Jonathan Taylor and Travis Etienne in the same tier, and they're mostly the same asset class. So in terms of, do I have a preference between them in the same tier? Basically says, I just don't really have a preference between them. You want to give me one, you want to give me the other. You want to add a pick on top, I'll take the one with the pick on top. Now you see Christian McCaffrey in the tier with the 2 of them, different asset class, right? That means essentially, if I'm trying to win my league this year and I really need the points, right? If your team is set up where Christian McCaffrey would be a very big difference maker for you, then I probably do prefer him than the other guys in that tier. And if that's not the case, where McCaffrey's points aren't being utilized to really make the difference between your team as like a middling playoff team to an elite contender, then I'd probably rather have Taylor and Etienne in that situation. So that's kind of what you'll see in the tiers. And you'll see it quite literally visually because of the color-coded asset classifications. So that's where basically you'll kind of see as you go down the tiers, these different color codings, and you'll start to see, okay, these are the people in this tier that's like they're like young players with starter-worthy production and questionable profiles. And then these are the vet players with starter level production, and they're aging or whatever else. And then the other thing that I do in there is I start to sort out in kind of the middle. Really, once we start to get these wide divergences in terms of what these players are used for, I sort them further into clusters. So you'll see, for instance, tier 6, early 2, which is the value, right? Worth an early second round pick. Buying power cluster and production cluster. So buying power is the term that I use to usually describe what people call as value. So just the idea of like the value of this asset is not just what they're producing, but it's also what you can buy with that asset now and later. So for instance, in this tier, they're all in the same tier: Rachaad White, James Cook, Isaiah Pacheco, David Montgomery, Tony Pollard, and Alvin Kamara. But they're totally different clusters, where I have White, Cook, and Pacheco in the buying power cluster and the others in the production cluster. Similarly, you scroll down to the very lowest where I have this split out, which is a late 2, early 3 tier. Buying power cluster: Nick Chubb, Tyler Algier, Jaleel McLaughlin, Kendre Miller, and Roschon Johnson, right? None of those players are graded out as starting assets this year for varying reasons, either injury or youth or whatever. I have some level of optimism about what they're going to be down the line, versus you sort out the same tier, production cluster, Brian Robinson, Damian Pierce, Khalil Herbert, Raheem Mostert, Alexander Madison. So that's kind of to give you a picture. I put one cluster ahead of the other in the rankings. That doesn't actually mean anything. If I was to actually sort them out and linearly rank them, I would probably have them intermingled. I just think in terms of expressing sort of how I view these assets descriptively, I like to kind of have the like assets next to the like assets rather than, because how does, if you're in a real league, right? It's one thing to rank them. But if you're in a real league, it's kind of a silly question to be like, well, do I prefer Joe Mixon or Keaton Mitchell? It's like, I don't know. What the hell is my team like? Right. It's like I would literally do that exact trade in either order, depending on the league that I'm in, happily.
Yeah. That's where, when we always ask for more information, I mean, that's part of it. I think that's a great way to look at it. Depeche has a great question. Why is Achane so much lower in the tier than Gibbs?
Yeah, it would basically be two things, or I guess three things really. One being draft capital.
Yep.
That's the biggest thing, right? Like Gibbs is going to continue to get multiple chances, right? If Gibbs suffers an injury, he's just going to walk right back into his role. If Gibbs starts to underperform for a while, he's probably still going to be continued to get fed more opportunities. Like he gets a lot longer of a leash to have bad things happen to him or for him to do bad things.
Never want to happen.
Exactly. But like he's going to get the benefit of the doubt. Yes. When you're the 12th overall pick, like you have to fail repeatedly. Like you have to get hurt and get hurt again. You have to be bad for like multiple seasons. Like it's
held his value for years. Like to put like team to team example, Swift held value for years.
Right. Like let's even if you look at some examples, like Travis Etienne missed his entire first season with a broken foot, right? And was still granted an opportunity to come back and eventually earn a bell cow role under a different coaching staff and a different management group even, right? So that's Najee Harris has been bad for like almost his entire NFL career and is continuing to be the lead back even into this year, even as his role is coming out. Clyde Edwards-Helaire got 3 years worth of chances, right? So I'm not saying Gibbs is going to be bad, but so that's a big thing. Pass catching is another thing. Like Achane has been dynamic in the receiving game, but really not on the same volume level than what Gibbs has been force fed. And then the health is one other aspect where Achane's coming off of an injury. We'll see what he looks like coming back. He's been the more. Yeah, I mean, Depeche saying wouldn't production like Achane's give him a bigger leash? I mean, yes and no, but it's he's going to need to continue to earn his keep, right?
Yeah.
Right now we're frozen in time. He's coming back injured, but and look, to be clear, I don't expect this to happen. I think Achane's incredible, and I've always thought so. But like, let's say he comes back and he's coming off reasonable injury, and he's not very good for the rest of the year. We don't see those explosive plays, right? Like. Realistically, their projection rest of the season, if both are healthy, is kind of similar. They're both in really fun offenses. They're both probably going to be seeing half the work in a backfield that can produce a ton of fantasy points for a player seeing half the work. But there's just more risk to it with Achane than Gibbs. He's a lot more fragile. So I would happily pay a little extra on top of Achane after what we've seen from Gibbs, where we just don't have to worry about the concern of betting on a third round pick with some size outlier stuff, with some injury stuff. It's a similar bet, but I think Gibbs is a much less risky bet.
So Jacob, I have a question for you. I like how you were laying out how you're doing your tiers and how you're trying to group players together, even inside their own tiers, but doing like these little buckets of players. I really like that. Something that I'm usually doing inside my tier rankings, it might have too much sway in how I tier running backs, is how I personally would feel about them if they were on my roster, and whether or not I'm happy that they're on my roster from terms of like, yes, they're giving me production, but I know that they have no value, or their only value is to me just having them on there versus me wanting to get rid of them because I know there's value, but I don't feel comfortable in how safe that production is going to be, and vice versa. So I try to do it agnostic of where I believe my team is in terms of that. And I know that the context behind how your team's performing has a lot to do with how you should be acquiring rosters or acquiring players, how you should be handling your roster and your whole strategy. But how much of it do you put into like, I don't know what my team is, but this is just how I generally feel if this player were on my roster?
I'm not super sure what you mean. Like I would always view every rank in terms of what their value would be on my team, but also on anyone's team. Like I don't know, like I'm not sure. I try to like just rank them based on what I think that they are, in my opinion, worth at their break-even price. You know, and I then put the asset classifications that I think should make pretty clear, like, you know, only certain teams should want a Joe Mixon on their team or a Derrick Henry on their team. But I try to view it from the perspective of like what this player be worth under the assumption that they're useful to me.
Fair enough. So I think Brian Robinson's a really good example of this right now. I am extremely happy to have Brian Robinson on my teams, but I'm not actively wanting to go out there and acquire more of Brian Robinson. And I don't necessarily want to sell him because I know his value isn't as high as I want it to be.
I'm about to get tilted.
But he's been producing. So it's somebody that he keeps creeping up my rankings because I know that he's good for the production of my team, but he doesn't really help in terms of value. And he's not like an aging vet. He's not like a Derrick Henry or someone else who definitely produces, but you know that there's that age factor that's always looming over. I think he's a very interesting test case.
Right. I try to never ever think of how other people might view my players.
Correct.
Okay.
It's like my number one pet peeve in the fantasy industry is people like doing this weird game where we're like, I want to value this player because I think other people might like them more. Like our perception as an industry like changes so frequently. Like Dak Prescott was like persona non grata like 4 weeks ago. Now he's incredible. Like the cycle of Dak continues. You know, CeeDee Lamb was a fake alpha. Now it's like, what's the difference between Chase and Lamb really? Like in terms of the players of like who everybody likes and dislikes changes so frequently. Like, so to me, what I try to think about is just, what do I think this player is worth? Basically in terms of like their production now and any sort of expectation for their production later. And then I just kind of put them at that slot. And so if the value that he is attainable, that a player is attainable at, comes in consistently below what I think that they're worth, then that's, you know, those are the players I end up buying more frequently. And the players who are generally sellable at the value that's above what I think that they're worth, you know, those are the players that are certainly wind up being off my team. So like for a Brian Robinson or whatever, like I don't really rank him with a lot of thought to, you know, do other people like him or not? For me, it's more a matter of like, what do I think this guy's current production is worth? What I think are his chances of maintaining in a role in the future? And what do I think that role will be for fantasy? And then like overall, what do I think that's worth in terms of a pick value? I think I have him, if I had to check, I'm guessing I'm like either my mid 2 tier or my early 2 tier.
You put him near Dameon Pierce if my memory serves me right.
I'm at the top of my late 2 tier. Yeah, and I think that's like this week was pretty incredible for him. But he's also had plenty of weeks where he's not really all that used in the passing game, and he's in a split in terms of, you know, early down. So to me, I consider him like a streamer. Like if I'm projecting his production over the rest of the season, I think it's going to be in that like probably 11 to 12 points per game range based on what his role is in the context of the offense. I know he's been overperforming that in certain games this year. And that's like, you know, so to me, I probably need either a lot of confidence in the talent of a player, or they need to be like starting level value for me to want to roster a guy at like a mid 2 or an early 2 level. So he's still in that late 2 value range for me. I know to other people, he's worth a lot more than that. So, you know, I've once upon a time, I've had a lot of Brian Robinson on my teams. I drafted a ton of them in rookie drafts. I don't have much left. I've sold almost all of this year.
And I think part of the benefit to your point, Lucas, is that I feel like as portfolio players, you don't get the benefit of holding on to someone in hopes of like someone's going to like them more eventually, because you'll just, in my opinion, I just lose track of too many players in that sense. Like I'm constantly just trying to churn out. Like if somebody's value becomes an outlier, I'm making that move. So if let's say for example, if Jerome Ford absolutely goes nuclear the next 3 weeks and his value jumps, like somebody perceives him as worth that first round pick, regardless of what I think of him, I'm moving him because that's not where I have him. That's not what I think of him, but his value has become an outlier. Whereas if his value dropped so far down that somebody's willing to give him to me for like a third because he like sprained his hamstring or something, I'm probably going to buy it.
Right. So, Brian Robinson is almost a perfect example of this, actually, in the sense that, like, you know, like when I drafted tons of in rookie drafts. He was drafted players in rookie drafts. But, like, it wasn't as much. Well, I was never thinking, like, oh, like, one day people will like Brian Robinson as much as I do. Like, it was more just, like, this guy is, you know, he's okay. And I think he has a pretty good chance to start for this team at some point. And I don't know what that's worth, but it's probably worth a third-round rookie pick to me. I'll take a stab. And then, like, I never really, you know, I try not to pay that much attention to, like, I almost never go on Keep Trade Cut. I don't really go on Fantasy Calc. Like, I try not to keep up with what the market is. I find it annoying. You know, it's just sort of what I started to notice was, like, you know, last year it was like, okay, you know, I'm not dumb, right? I can tell, like, oh, my player's been shot. Well, probably not a great time to trade him, so I'll keep him. And then it was like he started games and he was doing stuff, and I started being like, oh, I wonder if people are interested in Brian Robinson at all. Like, why don't I start sending out some Brian Robinson offers? And no one was interested in Brian Robinson. And then he started doing some stuff again this year, and then I started just like, oh, I'll send some offers that I think are just a little bit above what he's worth to me. And then people started hitting yes, and that was kind of how I learned, like, oh, I guess people like Brian Robinson now, and that people like are interested in trading for him all of a sudden in a way that they really weren't before. So, like, I often probably, like, in terms of these market things, it's like usually I just kind of trade for guys at what I think they're worth. And then if I was, you know, if then it turns out that I start valuing this player way more than the market does, it's usually I just find out by starting to roster a lot more of them. And if I start valuing someone less than the market does, I start rostering a lot less of them. And it's like I'm just constantly sending out trade offers. Like every week I'm sending out trade offers in 30, 40 leagues. And I'm usually perceiving the market as I just see my exposures rising or falling.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what we always talk about. The micro market should dictate 90% of what you're doing. Like, it's okay to want to, like, be up to date. I know, Jacob, you say you hate it, but I think it's okay to be, like, up to date on what the quote unquote market is. But at the end of the day, your micro market dictates everything. If you're like, well, the market says that Christian McCaffrey is worth, you know, 2 firsts over Josh Jacobs, but I can only get, you know, a second. Well, guess what? Your micro market's telling you exactly what you're going to get, and you have to be confident and comfortable moving within that market, which I think is a very important distinction.
Well, that's why I think it's dangerous when fantasy analysts call people buys or sells without, like, really qualifying what the buy price is or what the sell price is, right? And then some people say, like, oh, buy at market or sell at market, and it's like the market is is difficult. Like, you know, that's why I try to cut out that middle step where I just say, like, here's what I think this player is worth. So, like, you know, the example is going to be, how do you view someone like Kyren Williams? Well, if my first answer was to be like, I think Kyren Williams is a buy, or I think Kyren Williams is a sell, you know, in order to do that, first I would need to have a very keen perception of what Kyren Williams' value is in the market, which, like, I don't know. My guess is it's probably around an early to mid second round pick. I'm not sure, though. That's like my kind of estimation. What's Kyren Williams worth in your league, Depeche? I don't have a fucking clue. So is he a buy or a sell? I don't know. Are you the Kyren Williams manager? You know, are you talking to the Kyren Williams manager? You know, what I do is I rank what I think he's worth. In this case, I have Kyren Williams ranked as my base 2 tier, which means effectively I think he's worth a mid-second. So is he a buy or a sell? I don't know. If someone was offering me a third or a second for an early second for Kyren Williams, or a player that I think is worth an early second for Kyren Williams, then I guess in that league, to me, he's a sell because I would sell him for that. You know, if I'm able to acquire him for a late second, then I think he's a buy because I would buy him for that. That's really all I would be. So, but I mean, most of the time, the way I look at it is I'm not ever maybe this goes into next week. Like I'm almost never trading for players. I'm especially in season. Like in season, I'm almost always just basing my trades off of the managers and then my own team. Like it's like what position is my team? Am I trying to add play? Like every team I'm almost trying to do one of a few things, right? I'm either trying to like add some sort of stopgap points because I have a specific need, right? Like either my team's a little short or it's injured or something, or I'm trying to sell all my players because I'm trying to tank, or I'm trying to add an elite producer because I think that I'm, adding one big piece and make a big difference, or I have a ton of value and I'm trying to consolidate into like a higher, younger elite asset. Like that's probably the main objective I'm trying to pursue on any of my 62 teams, almost certainly one of those 4 objectives. And then it's like based on where that team is, what are the managers who I think are most likely to help me fulfill that objective? So, for instance, okay, but I have a team that has a lot of value and I have a few too many points on my bench and I'd like to consolidate. I'd like to add an elite piece. So then I have to look at, okay, who are the teams that are inclined to sell an elite piece? And I would look at it and be like, well, are there any non-playoff teams that have a Diggs or an Adams or a Cup or someone like that? Maybe. Or are there any competing teams that have like a Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave or someone who I'd be willing to consolidate for, and use my bench assets to add on top of like an older player, get one of those players, maybe not producing as much. And then I just try to craft the trades from there. But like, I'm not really saying like I'm set out to trade for X player. It's more like, what are the managers that might be amenable and what are the players that would fit? So in the case of a Kyron Williams, it's like, well, if I have a team, where it makes sense to sell a player like Kyron Williams, it also probably makes sense to sell like Brian Robinson. If I have a team that could use the services of Kyron Williams, could probably also use the services of a Brian Robinson, right? Like it would just be a matter of on this team, if I need a running back, who does the team that wants to sell a running back?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And look, I know we kind of went off the rails on the RB ranking thing. We've completely driven head first into trade theory, which I'm loving.
Well, Depeche has a good follow-up to that.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, let's ask. But is the only
everybody else can? I'll get out of here. I'll answer my answer, and they can add this. To me, how do I determine the value? It's how I view the player.
Yeah,
I don't care how my league mates view the player. Like if my league mates view my players less favorably than I do, then I'm not trading them that player. And if they view them more favorably than I do, then I am trading them that player. How do I value the player? It's how I value the player. Like I value Kyron Williams as a mid-second. Whether I'm buying him or selling him in my league, then is entirely dependent on how other people value Kyron Williams. All I can control is how I choose to value a player and then what makes sense for my team. And if there's a player where my value versus my league mate's value and my team needs versus the players that could help those needs, if those things all align, that's when I'm buying or selling a player. But I'm not assigning a Kyron Williams mid-2 value by like me sticking my finger in the wind and guessing at how other people value him. I don't know how other people value him. If you pull 12 people in your league, you're going to get at least 5 or 6 different answers on how he's valued. So I'm just saying that's how I value him. If you wish to listen to my advice on what to do with Kyron Williams, then presumably you care about how I value him. So that's what I'm telling you. If you disagree with how I value him, Godspeed, right? Like I'm not saying that I value him right, but that's all I'm putting is how I value the player. That's when I talk about a player's value, it's in terms of how I value.
So I think that's a really interesting distinction between the way you and I have been doing tiers right now. Is I feel like you definitely have a better handle over what your expectations are for players, and you have a much better sense of how your personal values in them. I'm still relying a lot more on how the market is valuing those players until I have a very strong personal sense that I think the market's wrong. That's been one of my ways that I've been handling the teams. It's helped me at times. It's really burdened me a whole awful lot of times too. But it always goes back to those expectations, and it's on then the manager themselves to say, do my expectations meet the way that the rest of the league, what their expectations are for these players? If that ends up working out and it also fits the way that you want to be building your team, then go ahead, make those trades, whether you're buying or selling. find whatever value meets the expectation for that and take advantage of it. I think what you were just saying at the end, that's perfect. If you have people who are close to it, like the Kyron Williams and the Brian Robinson, if you can find someone who's willing to move that piece and you need a piece like that on your team, it doesn't really matter at that point. As long as they're in the same sort of expectation tier that you have and you can get them, then go out and do that.
See, I look at how I value a player. It feels like way different. I do take the market into account and where I start my evaluation of that. Is everyone, if the masses are saying on multiple websites and multiple sources, okay, well, Walker is worth 2 1s. Okay, cool. I'm going to start there and then I'm going to weed out, okay, is there anyone in my league that thinks that way? Okay, awesome. Then I'm going to cash out. Okay, well, there's not. Well, speaking of Walker, Toronto Dave says, I've been trying to trade away Kenneth Walker for several weeks and no takers. Well, let's have a look at that. Did you base off the market first and then test all that out? And then have you tinkered? Okay, awesome. What's your selling point? What are you willing to do? And it gets to a point where I'm just not willing to sell that far below. And then I hold that player. Whether it's because I like them, I like the situation, I like their production. I start with base market value first. And then I kind of start downloading my either insecurities of that player into his value. Or if I really love that player, I start downloading that into his value and I go from there. So that's how I perceive it, which I feel like is completely different than everyone else here. But that's also why we get a lot of deals done. I feel like
that's way more eloquent way of saying why I was trying to get to there. Way better phrasing of it. I would definitely say that, yes, the market, I think, is a very good place to start. And all those websites out there, the reason why everybody goes back to them is, and this is really a good question, but it's because it's a good universal.
People go back to it because it's easy and they don't know how or want to figure it out for themselves.
But you did have to have your own perspective on it.
Right.
I feel like that's something that's really tough, especially for people new to Dynasty, to actually do, is start building your own point of view, your own perspective, and then start going out there and acting on it.
And that's the thing. Like, I don't sit there and I'll DM Jake and be like, I'm kind of thinking about this deal here. Like, can I get like some outside opinion? Like, am I going batshit and things like that? Nick Fury says playing only at market is tough because you can end up holding too long, never acquiring because you'll only pay at market. I agree with that, which is why I start at market. And I think that's a clear differentiator, is you start there and then you kind of adjust after you're basically told to kick rocks or that somebody's willing to pay more.
Yeah, I've leaned into this like market hater persona.
Shocker.
I just think that the fantasy community and Dynasty community, especially within like the Twitter bubble, has just kind of adopted this stuff too much to the extent that it stifles movement in leagues. But I don't think that, like, I'm not saying that a player, especially a new player in Dynasty, like, I hope this doesn't get misinterpreted. I'm not saying that a new player in Dynasty or whatever, like, should not ever look at KTC or something. Like, I think probably if I were like, if a new Dynasty player came up to me and they were like, hey, like, I value, your perspective. How should I go about like trying to figure out what players are worth? Or maybe not what players are worth, but how I should be figuring out what kind of trade offers to make or accept. Like, I think probably a reasonable place to start would be, you look at I prefer fantasy calc to keep trade cut if you're looking at an aggregate source, whatever. You look at some sort of reliable aggregate source, just to at least get a ballpark of like how players are valued in relation to one another. And then, if there's a few analysts you trust, if it's me, if it's Tom, if it's Lucas, if it's anybody that you follow, that you hear their process and you go, this makes sense to me. I kind of like this. Look at look at some of their rankings and then inject your own thoughts subjectively to what you think of those players. And, yeah, I would say like as an easy way to start, if you can more or less get the market value of the players that you like more than the market, great. And you can sell at the market value for players you like less than the market, great. Like that's probably a good way to operate things. I would say that the next level beyond that is figuring out a way to, be a little flexible in applying your team situation to these market values where you're kind of not necessarily what I would say with the market. Maybe this is a better way of putting it. I think a lot of people look at the market and they say, what I need to do with these trades is get market wins, right? I need to beat people in the market. And I think that the idea of this like macro market aggregation tools, keep trade cut, fantasy calc, ADP, whatever else, when they're used as a tool, I think that they're excellent. Like I've had a lot of really very pleasant trade negotiations where you get two people who are in different spots. I talk about this in my Reasons to Trade and Dynasty piece. For instance, I'm tanking and another player is trying to add points. And so we agree, like, okay, hey, we're in a spot where we make good trade partners. Can we come to an agreement on like a player that we view kind of similarly? And then we just figure out how to make like a market even deal where you get the player that makes a lot more sense being on your team than mine. And like that's like a very pleasant way of doing things. When you have some teams where it's like just two people, or it's like the only way to do this trade is if I'm getting the market win. Like it just stifles movement. It doesn't help your own team. You end up just holding players you shouldn't hold. You end up buying players you shouldn't buy. Like it's just silly.
Talk about all the time that people that feel the need to win a trade are always the ones that blame the rest of the league for not getting deals done. Like I've said on this show so many times that if you're the one in the league where you're looking around and you're the one not getting the deals done, and you're constantly calling everyone else in the league terrible, everyone only sends trade offers. That's you. You're that person.
If there's a guy in one of my leagues who is like 1-9 and has Alvin Kamara, and every week they post, it's like, oh, can't believe Alvin Kamara is wasting away on this team. Someone better trade for Alvin Kamara. And it's like, I send my like obligatory second and third, it's declined. Sometimes it's not even countered. Other times you'll get a counter of like a first. And it's like, well, okay. Like, I guess that's cool. Like, if you're charging a first for Alvin Kamara, nobody's going to pay it. I probably wouldn't complain about that. Right. It's like, and that's the end of the day. It's like, I always say, like, if you're complaining about no one taking the market for your deal, right? It's either your problem or it's your benefit, right? You think everybody doesn't value your player enough? Great. Yeah. I want the players that I think that everybody else is wrong, right? If everybody else is wrong, everybody else thinks my player isn't good enough, good. That should be the player that's on my team, right? Don't you want to have a team of all the players you value more than everybody else, right? That's how you find out. Nobody's willing to pay your price of player. But I can't do that. I'm 3-7. Okay. If you have a 27-year-old player and you're 3-7, like, I guess that's your problem, right? Either you're going to be holding a 27-year-old player, or you're going to take a little less than you think he's worth. But it takes two to tango. You don't get to choose. So,
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just going to keep repeating myself. So you
it goes the other way too, right? Like, you're 1-9. I see you have Bijan on your roster. You don't need him. Why would, of course, I'm going to send you 3 seconds or, my late first straight up for Bijan, because that first is going to be more valuable to me or to you than Bijan would. You don't need a young running. Like, I know that, again, I mentioned this rankings episode has turned into like a trade theory and trade venting episode. Like, this is like therapy set. I feel like we need therapy.
It's been really good for us though.
I feel better. I feel like we need like therapy. I might drop therapy music in behind for this episode to like set the ambiance of when this went off the fucking rails. But if you're not constructing your trades, like if you're like, this guy needs a running back, or I need a running back, who does he have? He's like Jacob said, 3-7, and he has Brian Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm definitely just going to try to take Jahmyr Gibbs from him, because that's one of those two. That's the one of the two that he's definitely going to feel like moving because he's bad. Like, can you actually just logically construct trades that work for both parties and stop being concerned about having to win and dummy the guy? I feel like that's the biggest trade difference between redraft and dynasty. In redraft, it's really hard to get deals done because you have to win it. Like, that's the view. But we look at deals all the time, but we do this regularly. We like to torture ourselves in the League of Record every year, where we just start posting like the worst trades from 2020 or the worst trades from. Can you believe we did this? At the end of the day, we're like, damn, we trolled that guy for that deal. But guess who ended up being right?
Yeah.
So you don't know. You think you know. You don't fucking know. You don't know.
Right. It's like really all that trading, like getting the benefit of it in the market does is you just like, these things have such wide ranges of outcomes on every trade, right? Like if I was to make a list of my top 10 like market W trades, as in like the 10 trades that I was like most fucking pumped about the minute that they happened, and then the trades like looking back that were like the 10 best trades ever, like there would not be a ton of overlap on that list. Like there's a couple. Like really all the market W does is like if you're super wrong, you're a little protected, right? Like the trade will probably not be quite as bad as it would have been if you had traded away or traded for these players, under even circumstances. And it makes the opportunity for good trades to become even a little bit better, right? It's like, oh, like you traded for Jonathan Taylor when everybody thought he was terrible. Wait, and you also got him even a little bit cheaper than everybody else was getting him. Like, oh, now it's even better than a trade that already would have been good. But like most of the time we see these trades go down in our leagues that we all get upset about. And it's like, okay, what would have made it reasonable? Well, if they added a second. Well, how oftentimes do you look back on a trade like a year later and it's like, oh, the second was the difference. It's like nobody actually cares, if the second was the difference. So usually it's pretty fleeting.
Base Shaboba makes this point. Trading RBs in season feels like getting an enema. It's either overbuying or underselling. It can definitely feel that way. 100%. It's very uncomfortable.
So I do have one more rankings question, and I've been waiting to get to it for a while, but just haven't been good.
You have to cut us off, Lucas. Like that's what your job is. I might be the host, but sometimes I get off on tangents, and you have to be the backup host that tells me to shut the fuck up.
So Bijan Robinson's right now in a tier of his own. What is it going to take for him not to be in a tier of his own anymore? Because there's not a running back in this class who's going to even come close to rivaling Bijan or even be a tier.
No, these 24 running backs are ass, bro.
Yeah, it's not looking good. So that means that something's going to happen most likely with the way that we're perceiving Bijan Robinson's value. So what is that action that has to happen for him not to be in a tier of his own? Or is he just going to ride that for a while?
I
don't know. Like
I think if Gibbs doesn't get hurt, right? Like if Gibbs finishes out the rest of the year and he's getting that goal line work and he's scoring the touchdowns and he's still getting, then at that point, I don't see a reason why Gibbs can't jump up in that same tier. And honestly, same with Hall. Like I think there's a very real chance where Gibbs and Hall join Bijan at the end of the year. I don't think it's as likely, but that's kind of what I'm seeing. And like, I might be playing Narrative Street a little bit with my tiers, but if Aaron Rodgers does come back this year and he is somewhat capable of playing half of what he can be and can throw that ball to Breece Hall, I mean, in terms of just youth, ability, and production, I think those three are so similar that they could end up in the same tier. I'm sure Jacob doesn't necessarily feel the same way, but it's getting to a point where I'm willing to start looking at for sure Gibbs as same tier as Bijan. Like if we were to redraft the class, it'd be very hard for me to not view it differently in terms of Gibbs to Bijan, but I think there's a chance Hall joins them too. I really do.
I mean, Bijan has no workload concerns inherently, right? Like I understand that his concerns have existed this year, but if you just try to zoom out, He has the requisite size. He has the requisite passing down ability. All of his efficiency stats in both the receiving and the rushing game have been fantastic. He has the draft capital. He has like the priors, quote unquote. There's just no hole in his profile. So to me, it really is like a fundamental inevitability that he ends up having like a 20 plus, 22 plus point per game season within the early portion of his career, barring a catastrophic injury. Whereas Gibbs, it's just like the David Montgomery thing, like matters and it doesn't matter, right? It's like when he was getting talked about, like, is Jahmyr Gibbs like a backup? It's like, well, no, like we should not care that much about David Montgomery playing a certain amount of snaps. But like then when we start talking about would we rather have him or Bijan in Dynasty, like, yeah, it matters that Gibbs is 199 pounds and that he's probably never going to see, a full like 80% snap share over a sustained period of time, that he probably wouldn't actually be all that good at it if he did it. So like that matters. Hall, little different story. Like Hall's, I guess, kind of the same as Bijan in like a build skill competency perspective. Year older, matters a little bit at running back. Already had an ACL tear. That matters to me. And so it's that's probably maybe closer from like an asset class perspective. But I just think Bijan is so much safer in terms of the youth and the health. And like, there's just no questions that it just puts my mind at ease more. I'm seeing Brian bring up CMC. I think that is like nuts to me personally. I don't think CMC has any place being anywhere in the first two tiers.
Agreed.
He's 27. Like, I mean, just in terms of how much these guys are worth, like he's just one injury away from like plummeting in value, that it's just a lot of concern to me.
Dipping at all.
I get it.
In the year he's going to plummet.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I guess it all depends. It's everybody has. CMC is really in an asset class of zone, right? It's like, who would you rather have this season? It's him, and there's no one who's even remotely close. And then it's just determining like at what point in time, as you go down your running back risks list is like that unique bet, right? He's like the Kelsey of running backs. It's like at what point in time are you willing to sacrifice X level of current and projected production and youth and everything for smash your whole league in the face current value. Yeah. And I guess like for me, that breaking point is like Taylor and ETN, right? And, I get it if other people have a higher, if it's Hall and Gibbs. I would get it if people are like, no interest. Yeah.
I don't know what else you're waiting for with Gibbs. I mean, he's just been elite and awesome and amazing. He's very good. Very good. We had a question here. Javonte on the up and up.
Sure.
I'm mad that I doubted myself and my opinions of Javonte after years of believing, and now he looks healthy and he's getting the work on an offense that is a lot better for fantasy than it once was. I have him on the up and up. He's not pushing that top 12. He's close for me. He's 13 right now. But I have a feeling this week I'm trying not to be too reactionary when I tell you the receiving touchdown filled me with so much joy. He's on the up and up for me right now. I just bought him for 25-1.
That happened.
Actually, we just did that. Lucas, actually, as a contending team, I am way out on the 25 class as of right now. The full Tilt Devi show has been all over that. The 25 class just looks woefully bad. I'm happier moving off my 25 picks than my 24s right now, even if the 24s are late. Based on the information that I have right now, I'm buying for a 25-1.
This feels like maybe this. Okay.
We're gonna get a rant now. We can see.
I'm actually contemplating what to say. So I think I'm always so torn with this draft class stuff because on one hand, I always want to be buying the draft classes people think are shitty. Remember when the 2022 class was shitty? It wasn't shitty. Remember when the 2023 class was shitty? It wasn't shitty.
Sure.
Remember when the you know what's fucking great right now? The 2020 running back class. Like, that looks awesome, right? Checking in on those guys. The 2023 was supposed to be the great running back class. Turns out it was a horrible running back class. The wide receivers were supposed to suck. Oh, it turns out they rock.
Right.
We don't really know anything.
Sure.
Realistically, like, all draft picks it's just like a bunch of darts to stuff onto your roster and see what the hell happens.
Totally understand that.
That being said, I also think that there's an advantage to being ahead of the perception, right? Like, if we know that the Devi people are saying that the 2025 class is bad, it's like, okay, I think that they will be right when we actually in December of 2025, do I care that much if people thought the 2025 class was bad? I care a little bit, right? And not a whole lot. I care enough in the sense of, like, is there going to be any quarterbacks or running backs that get drafted really high, right? If the answer to that is no, that hurts the class off the top, right? Like, 2022 is kind of value capped in the sense that there are a lot of really good players, it turns out, from 2022. But there's no first-round startup picks from the 2022 draft class because Kenny Pickett was the first quarterback taken.
Hey, but shout out Sam Howell.
Right. So, like, I care that Drew Allar is ass. Right. That matters to me. Do I care that much about what they think of the round 2 receivers and running backs? Not really. They're probably wrong. Right. But that being said, do I care that everybody else is going to care? A little bit, right? Like, I care a little bit that, like, in a year, if everybody is talking about the 2025 class being bad, right now nobody knows. Like, there's outside of, like, Devi players, people in your average dynasty, if you ask them, is the 25 class any good? They'd be like, I don't fucking know, right? So to me, it's like probably you want to get out ahead of that. But then also, no matter what, picks are still going to rise in value in the near term because now, so probably I think the move is, once we get into the 2025 season, like in the summer, like after the 2024 rookie draft, that's when you probably start moving the 2025 ones for the 2026 ones. Because the 2026 class, supposedly from the Devi people, is pretty interesting, right?
Archie, baby. Let's go. Archie, let's go.
We get Archie, we get Fonte, we get Nico, we get Malachi.
So I'm saying... One of the reasons that I'm comfortable moving that 25-1 instead of my 24 ones for a player like Javonte Williams right now that I think is on the up and up is because I'm more comfortable in that I get a year to adjust my priors. I get another year to look at it and go, oh, crap, I need to readjust and start acquiring ones. And at the end of the day, I always want, on a competitive team, which this one is, I want everyone else's ones, not my own, because I trust my ones to be higher than someone else's who I likely think is going to be dog water on a competitive team. And that competitive team can completely collapse in the next 5 months. Like, everything could go wrong. And now I'm a bottom seed and I am begging, pleading on my knees, begging for my pick back and paying that 5x price because I know I'm going to be dog water. So that's why I'm more comfortable when I say that I think the class is bad. I think the class is bad right now from the information that I've been able to gather at the Full Tilt Devi podcast and beyond in the Devi community. But I also know that I have more time to adjust. If I'm moving my 24-1s for these guys, I have limited time to adjust and I'm paying a steeper price to adjusting. I was ahead in our, let's say, our home league. I was the first one to start trading for first 2+ years in advance. And it gave me a small advantage until I traded all those picks away like a dum-dum. But I think there is an advantage to having that early stance. But if you're a good enough manager, it won't matter because you can quickly adjust your priors if need be and if you're willing to, which I think is really important. But to answer the question, yes, I think Javonte is on the up and up. I'm probably capped out at my roster ship. I don't think I could go out and buy more at this point, but I'd be willing to. Right. If someone else wants to get out quickly based off the recent performances, I'm willing to go and have a listen. Right. And willing to, if I can move like a wide receiver for him or something, awesome. Like if I can move Nico Collins and something else, sweet. Like I'm in.
You do Nico plus for Javonte.
I would, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, interesting.
I think Nico's fine, right? But his peripheral numbers aren't as good as like I think Noah Brown's been equally good, if not better, in his role.
Well, that's the interesting thing with the Houston receivers is you get into this never-ending loop where you're like,
Also correct, Brian.
It's like it was one thing when it was Tank Dell and Nico Collins, and we were like, okay, we have this like young wide receiver who was kind of okay for 2 years, like interesting enough, and then he's breaking out. Okay, he's legit. Oh, and Tank Dell was, this like third round pick who really knew, but okay, sure, rookie could be good. They could both be good at once. That made sense. And Noah Brown doing this shit after let's be clear. Noah Brown is not exactly even starved of opportunity. He ran like 500 routes with Dak Prescott, who's a mighty good quarterback. And he was donkey balls.
Yeah.
So he's already played as a full-time player with a top 10 quarterback in the NFL and sucked ass. He's apparently now one of the most efficient receivers in the National Football League. It's at this point, it's like CJ Stroud is Peyton Manning. And I don't know how to tell the difference between the Reggie Waynes from the Pierre Garçons from the Austin Collies particularly well yet.
I saw that.
So
yeah,
I think one of Tank Dell and Nico is probably quite legit. I think the other one's probably getting carried. You also don't know how much it matters, right? For your Texans, from the organizational perspective, you're like, how good are Nico and Tank?
Right.
I don't care. They're good enough to be awesome with CJ Stroud. So we'll just invest all our resources into other shit, right? If we have two young receivers who are more than adequate, we're not going to just keep replacing them.
Right.
We have a shitty O-line. We have defensive issues. Let's do that, right? CJ Stroud, I think, is how much money, how bad would the odds need to be for you not to bet on him making the Hall of Fame?
I mean, right now, hey, I'm all in like you are. So we're
right. If you were to say minus 300, he makes the Hall of Fame. What or how about this? What odds would you need for him to bet on him not making the Hall of Fame? Even money, 3-1, 5-1, 10-1.
Oh man, I think 5-1. I think I would.
So you're giving him 80% at a gold jacket. Lucas, you're the level-headed one here. What are you giving him as percentage for Canton?
I mean, I'm just going off of what I know right now.
Quarterback. He has played less than a full season in the NFL. I'm not betting on him to make it into the Hall of Fame.
We have fun here.
I'm not going to.
We have fun here. Okay.
So if I gave you even money odds, you're taking not Hall of Fame.
Exactly.
Wow, this guy's a loser.
I know. I'm a big Debbie Downer. It's fine.
What an absolute.
You know what?
Bum.
He is making Dameon Pierce look bad, so it's making
Dameon Pierce is making Dameon Pierce look bad.
Do you think CJ Stroud is the second best quarterback in the NFL today?
No.
Oh my gosh, no.
I think he is.
Oh,
I think the only quarterback I would take this season, not Dynasty, IRL, is Patrick Mahomes.
That's interesting. I'm not going there. Nah, I can't do it. I can't.
If I was to, other than Patrick Mahomes, maybe I'll sell you on this one if you won't take that hot take. Other than Patrick Mahomes,
I love that we're getting hot takes from Jacob.
CJ Stroud has the second best chance of any active quarterback of being the greatest quarterback of all time. If we were to fast forward 20 years and say, who's the best quarterback of all time? I would say that the most likely answer to that question is Tom Brady. The second most likely answer to that question is Patrick Mahomes. The third most likely answer is CJ Stroud. And then the fourth most would be Caleb Williams.
Wow. I can't do that.
I would be interested. Well, okay, who would you take?
Time?
Right. Here's my take, right? I'm not saying he's going to be the third best quarterback of all time. I'm saying Tom Brady's already better than every quarterback who existed before our current time. So every quarterback who isn't Tom Brady and is currently retired, has a 0% chance of surpassing Tom Brady, who's also retired. So they're out, right? And then I'm saying like Patrick Mahomes has a puncher's chance of passing Tom Brady. And then I look at everybody else in the league or everybody else who could come into the league. And I say, okay, who has the next best chance of either finishing the career being thought of as better than Tom Brady and better than Patrick Mahomes, right? So it's like, I don't think Josh Allen has a very good chance. You can say, I think Josh Allen has a better career than CJ Stroud. Sure, that's possible. But in this very specific question that I've crafted, like, I think it's more likely that the guy with 0 career games, Caleb Williams, or 8 career games than CJ Stroud has a better chance of being thought of as better than Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes than like Josh Allen. Like, I think it's like extremely unlikely that Josh Allen is considered better than Tom Brady at the end of his career.
And are you just saying this primarily based on we are looking at them right now and we can, I don't want to say definitively say, but I think all of us agree that Patrick Mahomes right now is the best quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, by a lot.
Because we don't know what the ceiling or what the actual holds for Stroud, then he has that better chance. Like, I understand betting on that. I don't know.
I'm not betting him on over Mahomes. I'm betting on Mahomes. I know,
but like everyone non-Mahomes.
No, Will Levis. I'm seeing Will Levis has the same chance. Look, I like Will Levis. He does not have the same chance as CJ Stroud. Like, come on, guys.
Richardson.
CJ Stroud, like, okay, this is not even a hot take. This is like an objective.
We're way off base.
CJ Stroud is having the best rookie season of all time of any position. I think that's like an objective fact. I don't even think that's like a hot take. I think that's just true.
Yep.
He is having the best first football season of anyone ever.
Yep.
Like, I mean, he has turned a wide receiver room. Like, I don't know. You got to think about this too. What are the odds that in the context of a bad offensive line and no running game, that a journeyman bum, a third-round rookie with a pretty questionable prospect profile, and a third-year player with some ups and some downs in their profile have all simultaneously become awesome? Pretty low. Like, what's more likely that like we're seeing an absolutely like phenomenal special supernova blasted into Earth to change football forever?
Yeah, I don't know when this became.
And people said that 11th overall was hot. It's not hot. It was cold. I was wrong. I was inconsolably too low on CJ Stroud 2 weeks ago.
Man,
I should be pilloried and stoned and tarred and feathered for my hatred of CJ Stroud at 11th overall.
Yeah, he's
anything lower than 4 in your dynasty rankings is egregious from this point forward, in my opinion.
He is at 4 for me right now. I haven't hit publish yet, but he is at 4. It is Mahomes, Allen, or sorry, it's Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, Stroud, Lamar, Herbert. Is what I have. Okay.
I'm making every show a Stroud show, even if it's about running backs, until he's given the respect that he deserves. It's the greatest quarterback.
I think you're right. I just don't know.
I mean, Brian, I'd love to hear the case against this.
I don't understand what else you need to see from CJ Stroud.
What? I don't get it.
No, I don't get it either. Every bit of his data looks amazing, passes the eye test. And Toronto, I want to talk about Lamar for a second because I tweeted this the other day. I don't think Burrow still clears if you look at age. You're getting similar production out of a rookie. With not
Stroud's better than him.
Let's talk about Lamar for a minute. He is the worst elite asset you can own in fantasy football. He is. He's an elite asset, but
you go through this like Lamar Tilt every year. You go up and down. It's because he plays for your favorite team. Because you're so in it.
Look, he is the bet. Look, as even just looking at fantasy, you see like 10, 9, 12, 45. 15, 9, 51, right? Like he is the worst. He is the best elite asset you can have.
You should trade all your shares away.
I have been asking around in home league if I can move him. Trust me.
You can move him. Let me confirm to you that you can move him.
Oh, we'll talk after this. Toronto Days, this has become a CJ Stroud show again. Herbert is arguably ahead of Stroud too at the moment. Stroud is in the convo. We're still having back into that tier. We're already getting I'm
not use a small sample argument to describe rookies. What other kind of sample do you want them to have?
Right. Eventually you have to either buy in. And this is one thing that we mentioned, right? Where if you were in on Justin Herbert as a rookie, you profited. Right? You got to profit off of that because what you were buying him for was 3 times cheaper than what you had to pay to acquire him a year later. So at some point you have to buy in before people catch up, and still what you're paying at that buy-in is still going to end up being manageable if it goes south.
Buying like outlier level elite rookies is like the easiest investment in fantasy. Like there's just so few like there's plenty of people who have like good rookie seasons and you're like, oh man, was this guy good? Is this guy not? I don't know. Right. Like the Elijah Moores, your Chase Claypool, like whatever that can go either way. But like incredible, one of the best of the decade type rookie seasons at their position, right? If they just start doing this right off the jump, couple games in, 2 games in, 3 games in, just being like, yep, I'm buying high. It almost never fails. We should get back talking about running backs. I've derailed the show. Tank Dell over Javonte for me, Bindles.
Tank Dell or Javonte? Yeah, I'm taking Javonte straight up. I think Javonte has legit RB1, like top 12, not the RB1, but top 12 upside. Look, this episode has gone completely off the fucking rockers. We intended to do a running back. I'm gonna add an audio clip at the very beginning of the show where I'm like, today's episode was supposed to be about the running back rankings and how we do our tiers, and it turned into not fucking that. And then I'm gonna say, enjoy the episode and post it because this was not an RB rankings episode. I actually absolutely love that. Lucas is dying back here. I can't tell if he's laughing or crying.
My brain's broken right now, but so we did talk about tiers a lot, which was good.
Yeah,
I'm for rankings.
I'm broken inside a little bit because the logic behind what Jacob's saying is making too much sense to me that it hurts me inside a little bit, but I don't think I can pull that trigger even though it logically makes sense. And I understand what you're saying with that, and that just based off what we've seen, yes, there's tons of unknowns with CJ Stroud, but yeah, he does make a lot of sense. Yeah, my mind is not what it used to be now. It's a bowl full of mush. So yeah, that's been fun. And talking about running backs has been fun, but oh gosh, yeah.
I see Toronto Days approach for me is it's not about lack of confidence in Stroud, but rather respect to the established studs. I understand that take. I think that's an okay stance to have. It's not the stance that I have, but I think that's an okay stance to take. Brian said exactly that's why I'm not a day trader dynasty person. Yeah, that's fair. Yes, Workers only has small sample, but this is just my approach. I'm not saying don't buy him. I'm not saying not a big ceiling. I'm saying not fourth. Yeah, and again, that can be your approach. I think at the end of the day, that's what makes Dynasty special. That's how you can get trades done.
I get it. I get it. If you're like, look, Herbert, Burrow, whatever, they're older. Who cares? I know what they are, so I'm not going to bother taking on any risk. Like I'll take if your approach is like at worst, Stroud's like the same but younger. That's not that big of a deal. I'll just take the guy who is who like I have more confidence in the sample of. That's like reasonable. It's totally reasonable.
I do want to answer this question, but we've been an hour and a half.
Let's answer it. Let's answer the question.
All right, let's answer the question.
We're already down the rabbit hole.
Lucas is screaming, knowing that he's got to go to bed relatively soon, but we're going to answer this anyway. Back to running backs. We're going to shift back to running backs. At what point do we consider never buying an injury-prone running back? And I just want to stress, I know we often say there's no such thing as an injury-prone running back. There's just running backs who will inevitably get hurt. But in cases like this is true to fact. Like, pour one out for JK. Consider never buying an injury-prone running back like J.K. Dobbins, or are we still buying him considering his value being really low? I'll start this off by saying I am buying a lot of Nick Chubb and stashing him on my IR. I am not buying a lot of J.K. Dobbins because I think his value is done. Same with Cam Akers. I will never, right? Like at some point when you get double catastrophic injuries pretty much back to back, I'm out. But somebody like Kyler Murray when he tore his ACL, Nick Chubb when he tears everything in his leg and is posting pictures of like the broken Batman mask on X.com, I'm in. Like, I'm hype on that already. In 3 months, we're going to get hype Nick Chubb squat videos on the feed again, and I'm going to be all the way back in. I think there is a clear distinction on when and when not to buy these injured players. I'm interested in hear everyone else's take here. Jacob, Lucas.
I wanted Lucas to go first. I've been talking too much.
So, Dobbs, unfortunately, or not Dobbs. I saw the Dobbs coming. Now, like I said, my brain's broken at this point. But with J.K. Dobbins, it is sad. I'm okay with getting him, but it would. I mean, everything's for the right price. I'm so much more comfortable having Nick Chubb though, because I feel like, and this is going to be back to one of the things that Jacob said he doesn't like, but I feel like the market's going to respond much better to Chubb, and he will have that value going again next season that I can move him again if I want a different asset after that. I think he still will hold value. I have no confidence at all that Dobbins will hold any value going into next season, especially also with the fact that like Mitchell's doing well right now. That shouldn't be the end all be all here, but I feel like they can move off Dobbins extremely easy. I feel
he doesn't even have a contract.
Yeah, so it is what it is. I'd much rather have
Chris. This is the paragon.
There's a big difference between injury prone running backs and injured running backs, right? Like I get tilted when people are like, you know, talking about a perfectly healthy player that is injury prone. I think that you're allowed to consider the player without an Achilles. Like that's a pretty reasonable consideration. Am I buying Dobbins? Sure. I think I have him ranked in like the base third tier. I have bought Dobbins. I bought him for Rondale Moore.
That's exactly the type of deal.
Like
I wouldn't trade it.
Basically, like if I have something on my roster, here's how I view Dobbins. If there's something on my roster that I'd be willing to drop if my team was tanking for 101, I will trade any of those assets for J.K. Dobbins. I'll also trade a fourth for J.K. Dobbins. If the person is like J.K. Dobbins is literally nothing, he's never playing again in the NFL, he's no longer even in the player pool, I'll be like, sure, he's in the player pool for me. I would not trade anything of value for him. Like I think that it would be a significant upset if he is ever a starting fantasy asset again.
Yeah, I agree. I'm inclined to agree. I wouldn't trade a 4th round pick. You can get your Puka Nakuas and any tight end that plays for those picks. And yeah, I think
like if you're a tanking team and someone's like, I want Dante Foreman, it's like, okay, like sure, I could re-roll him into Dobbins, I guess. That's fine.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's sick. I think that this was a fantastic show. I think, as I want to mention this again when people aren't talking, Chris Sanzo says this was the paragon of running back shows, perfect balance, which means we mentioned running backs for like 20 minutes and then never mentioned them again till an hour later because Chris hates every running back. And Toronto Day says, I'm an injury-prone fantasy manager. I got you on that one too. My whole body aches every single day. Guys, it's time. Let's get into player picks and get the hell out of here.
Let's get
great. We're going to hit almost 2 hours, and I'm not sure how people are going to like that on Fantasy Points. I'm not sure how often they get content like this long, but we're going to give it to you. So here we go. Okay, so once again, I have to remind everyone, every week we play this game where we pick a player outside of the top 15 for quarterback, outside of the top 15 for running back, outside of the top 24 at wide receiver, and outside of the top 10 for tight end. We tally up those points every week. The winner at the end picks the drinks of choice of the other hosts on the live draft show, which looks like it'll be day 3 from now on with Fantasy Points live stream of day 1 and 2.
Where we will uncover the next Puka Nakua.
Right. We're going to do that. And we're going to discuss fantasy implications of everything that we saw through the day, quick reactions, all that kind of good stuff, while the others drink the drinks of choice of the person who wins this game. And as I mentioned, I've been in the fucking lead almost the entire year. I feel really good about myself. I said almost the entire year, Lucas, bite me. But for someone who's now in last, Lucas, at 421.24 points, you get to go first tonight.
Vacation was good for the soul, but was not good for my weekly point standings. Yeah, I went into vacation with the lead, and now I'm 20 points behind the lead. And I'm like, oh, I don't even know how this happened. But moving on to more fun things. So I like the match.
I am better. I am better.
Yeah, that was a fun tweet too. Whenever I sent that tweet out about the new fantasy points tool for their matchups and stuff, I truly thought I was in first. I had not checked the points at that point, so that was a rude wake up call for me. On to my picks though. Quarterback, I have Jordan Love. I like the matchup. Don't love the player though, but just going with the gut thing. And since Thomas already had Lawrence and sorry, not to spoil things, but
thanks.
I liked your pick. Swinging for the fences here. Going with Chandler, running back, with the two former Tennessee players, although then Chandler went to North Carolina. Another fun thing, still like the matchup, and he looked good in his limited usage. Tank Dell, especially if Nico Collins happens to be out again, he's been really good so far, so that's my wide receiver. Oh, lost my voice there. And oh my gosh, why can't I say anything? My brain's broken, guys.
Wait, what do the wide receivers have to be ranked outside of?
Top 24.
Tank Dell's not too high. No, Tank Dell's in the top 24.
It's top 20, right?
Or it is 100% the top 24. It has always been the top 24.
Tank Dell's number 20.
My brain, he's 22 last I checked. You know what? Fine. I will pick another wide receiver really fast. Give me just 1 second.
Getting called out. See, I thought last week Lucas had a wide receiver that was higher than I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Cheater. I think you just docked 10 points off him right now.
I think we absolutely should. He was so mad that we let your picks stay in when you were the only one that made him.
True.
But he's trying to make it up in the aggregate. He's just out here
being
Armstrong.
Fine then. Nico Collins. Let's go. Let's deal with it. It is what it is. Unless you already have Nico, son of a gun.
Just go Noah Brown. Just say Noah Brown and just pick a
No, you can have whoever. I don't need to pick Nico because he's probably not even gonna play.
It's all good.
All right, you can have Nico. I'm gonna switch.
No, I'm going with DJ Moore. I'm going to hit DJ Moore again, and I'm hoping with Fields coming back, they can rekindle some of that magic.
I just want to be organized one day. One day we're going to be organized.
That's my pick. It's done. It's all over.
In second is Jakob. He's rolling up with a respectable 424.66.
All right, I am going to roll with at quarterback. Look, I don't know if he's back, but he's at least respectable, and he has a good matchup this week.
That throw last night was insane.
That was sick. Didn't it remind you of the Lockett throw on Thursday Night Football?
It was so disgusting.
It's so fun. So I'll take Russell Wilson. It's spicy. And then I'm going to take Jerome Ford. Truly becoming like a my guy type player for me here. Built Ford tough. He has gotten his first 2 weeks up over a 60% snap share in the last 2 weeks. So it felt like it took them a while to recognize that he's clearly the best running back in their backfield, but they have eventually figured it out. He still loses some short yardage work to Kareem Hunt, which is pretty annoying, but he gets all of the receiving work, and he is now getting the majority of the carries between the 20s. And I expect him to have a healthy diet this week against the Steelers. This is just funny. For the people that remember my former motto, this is an off-brand pick, but this week and this week only, I do fuck with Tyler Boyd's. Because we're going to take Tyler Boyd here because I forgot that Nico Collins had an injury and almost certainly won't play. So I'll take Boyd. Plays in the Thursday night game against Baltimore. Jamar Chase is still in some sort of pain. I expect them to have a lot of attention on him. And so, sure, why can't Boyd come in and play a significant second fiddle role in what should be a rare, fun Thursday night football game. And then I will take Luke Musgrave. They've been using him more down the field on seams the last couple of weeks. He's actually getting some air yards versus just running him out on a million flat routes like they did the first few weeks. So excited to see what he does. And at least it can help siphon off some of Tom's quarterback points.
Right. And I just want to point out, Dylan, I see your question. What you're describing is 100% collusion. I know you said not collusion, but that's colluding. I don't quite know how to answer that without it ending up being colluding. But when two players devise a plan to beat another family member in a family league, and you need to figure out how you can make this trade look not like obvious collusion, that's collusion. And you don't want to do that.
No collusion. It's not collusion. Not obstruction. It's not collusion.
It's a great deal.
It's just my team.
Deal.
I'm 8-2. Ivanka's 2-8. She wants to make sure we beat Biden, so she's gonna trade me Travis Kelce. It's fine. It's not collusion.
They leaked her trade. Yeah, no, that's 100.
The failing New York Times says it's collusion, but they're out to get me.
What we're going to do is we're going to find out who all they are, and we're going to send them the Dynasty Points episode.
Crooked Fantasy Points Media Group is out to get me.
It's so beautiful. It's so good. But back to the task at hand, which has been difficult on this program.
Task at hand.
We've been having such a great time. I have to be the powers that be. He says he knows, and he gets. He's in on the bit. He's in on the bit. I am your leader in this game once again at 441.7 strong and dominant points. These aren't weak, meager points. These are strong 441.7 points. These are dominant points. We're not squeaking these points out. I'm definitely scraping every player that's just outside of the parameters of this game, now that Lucas knows once again what the correct parameters are.
I just went through the version history. It's top 20.
The champion is speaking. Thanks.
He was ranked 20 anyway.
I've been saying top 24 for weeks here, and no one corrected me. So
I've never picked a top 20. I always pick top 24.
That's right.
That's why I've been losing to Lucas. I've been picking all these bums ranked at 25.
Where's my button? I need my. All right, let's get some order on this show right now. The champ is trying to speak here. We got Trevor Lawrence. There's no way he's this ungodly bad again. It's got to be a squeaky wheel situation eventually. I think he's hashtag not good at fantasy football, but I need him here this week. I think the matchup is pretty okay. Good spot for a bounce back. Hashtag right about Calvin Ridley. Hashtag Christian Kirk forever. I'm going to take Javonte. He's getting the workload. He's scoring some touchdowns, back-to-back 20-point weeks. We like that. I think Marquise Brown, who surprisingly had no points this week. They just missed on a deep touchdown. Second game back with Kyler Murray. I love the what I hope is going to be a legit connection with Marquise Brown. And David Njoku's quietly been getting his targets. Dropped some horrendous passes this last week in a game that I don't really want to talk about too much. But I'm going to take David Njoku because he's a one play and gone type player. And he who shall not be named is actually starting to play up to par, up to snuff a little bit here. So I'm going to go with David Njoku to maintain my first. I don't care what you just sent me, Lucas. This is just how it is. This is how it will be. Okay.
Just as it has always been.
I push the buttons, and we've all learned that at the end of the day, I'm gonna. So you've just been picking players that are way up in the rankings, and we just never caught it.
We should dock him like 100 points.
Until we switched to fantasy points, I always put my ranking that I saw last on my players. And so then we just, we were streamlining it. I was just putting last name. Top 20. And I know for a fact,
Cheater.
I know for a fact y'all have been doing like the 15th on multiple times. So it's fine. It is what it is. Yeah, but I will say in the past couple of weeks, after I was first, if I've been cheating, it has not been helping me. It's been really, really hurting me. It's
Get owned, scrub.
sad.
Okay, look, that's gonna do it. That's our show for this evening. Great time. What did you just?
I was repeating what you said. Just the get owned scrub was truly incredible. The only thing that would have been better is if you said get pwned scrub.
Get good. Get good is another great one. Get good, scrub.
Learn to play.
Hey, I always love doing this show, and today feels like a little bit different than shows we've done in the past, and there's just something about that. I feel like every week we're just growing with this program, and again, shout out to Scott Barrett and John Hanson, everyone at Fantasy Points, giving us the creative freedom to do what we do here, to have these conversations, important conversations that you need to be having with your league mates and yourself at the end of the day, because the only way you get better is to question what you already know and discuss some things that you maybe had never thought of before. And that's what we're here to do. And remember, if there's content you want to know, I should probably say this earlier in the show, not an hour at 45, but if there's content you want to hear about, if there's discussions you want to hear about, players, takes, we are doing a trades episode next week. It's all trades. So if you have those trade questions, next week is the time to send them. We're going to do more trade philosophy, even though we covered it for like an hour in this running back rank show. Because that's how we do things. Next week's going to be a huge week. But if there's content you want, you have to let us know. Submit it, DMs, comments, Discord, all avenues, and we will cover. We are here for you at the end of the day. Whew, Jacob, as always, you have Thinking About Thinking. Those links are in the description. If you're not signed up to, in my opinion, the best Substack there is, that's where you're going to want to do that. Again, link in the description. Lucas, you have the Full Tilt Devy pod that is tomorrow over at Full Tilt Fantasy Football. And me, I'm just all over the place there at Fantasy Points, where you find all my content. My ranking update should be done tonight, if not tomorrow. I'll be in the Discord going back and forth. I love the activity. It's getting more and more in that Discord every day. From when I first popped in and it was a barren, empty place, it is now full of philosophy, trade questions, back and forths, and real brainstorming. And that's what we like to see. We're cultivating an active.
Who's your favorite philosopher?
Drake.
Nice.
Drake. Lucas.
The philosopher Drake once said.
Are you not? We're going to have to do a show now based on Lucas's facial reaction that I have now for all time when I said Drake. We're going to have to do this thing where it's like, who said it? We're going to have to just find a bunch of Drake quotes and ask, should I take, we have Discipline just asked, should I trade Keenan Allen and ETN for Eckler? Absolutely not. No, I would keep Keenan Allen and ETN instead of going and getting Eckler.
Yeah. Agreed.
It doesn't really matter who else you have. I just like ETN and Keenan Allen is like not Dynasty. Same thing. It doesn't matter to me. Eckler's been not very good. Toronto says LMAO. We got to get out of here. I don't want this to hit 2 hours. I still got to edit this thing before we put it back up. RIP to me. Wife is going to be mad. That's okay. That's the sacrifices we make. Remember to check in on your loved ones. Remember that clear eyes and full hearts can never lose. And your best days, well, goddamn, they're always spent tilting. Good night, everybody.